Well, welcome everyone to the Pandemic Survival Guide for Residential Contractors. This is number 15 in the series. We've been doing this all the way back to March. We're really excited to be here this week. We kind of have a special presentation for you, which we'll get into in a minute. For those of you that haven't joined us before, my name is Ed Earl. I'm coming to you from San Diego, where I run a construction project management business. And I've been in construction for about 30 years. I've got an MBA from Stanford, and I'm also a business coach with these two gentlemen that we have on our webinar with us today as part of our company, which is Residential Contractor Services Group. So I'm going to turn it over to our Finnish correspondent, Paul Sanneman.
That's right. Mine's Paul Sanneman. I've been doing this for 35 years, which makes me an old guy, I guess, at least chronologically. And my MBAs are from Stanford. It's from Cal Poly in education, so I don't match Ed, but I've been doing this for a long time. So I got more experience than he does. That counts for something. And, today's going to be a special program because I'm going to share with you ideas that have worked for me consistently the last 15 years. And as I said, I feel like a personal trainer. Everybody that followed this advice, if I was a personal trainer, got healthier, eat less exercise. So this advice we're giving you today will work absolutely 100% of the time, but you're going to have to do it.
All right, and I'm David Lupberger, former building contractor. As I've always said, I did the School of Hard Knocks instead. I'm also another old guy, but if you look at the three of us, it's either white hair or no hair. But that means there's a great deal of experience. So I'm going to turn it back to you, Paul. Go ahead and take over.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
real quickly, I just want to let people know. So this is a series we do every 2 weeks. We're doing to give people the latest and greatest updates. Now, as you all know, on most of these past webinars, we always have the latest and greatest updates on the PPP program and the EIDL program. So I don't know if this is good news or bad news, but the news is that there's really not much to report. As you probably read in the papers, the Senate and the House keep fighting back and forth over this whole next aid package, and basically they're trying to figure out the unemployment piece right now for the employment benefits. And so they put the whole PPP on the back burner. So they still have not approved the simplified loan forgiveness. There's talks of lots of different things going on there, but no definitive information to report. So instead, we decided this week to focus on this really key important piece, which is Paul is going to lead us through, which is marketing and how to develop your marketing. And I want to let you know, we typically try to keep our webinars to about 30 minutes. We've got so much content today, we're going to run a little bit longer, but I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Paul so he can share with you the good news about marketing in the pandemic. So I'm going to turn it over to Paul.
The only comment I have on the PPP is do nothing, because the longer we wait, the better it gets. And with any luck at all, one signature will get you out of the whole thing. So the advice is don't do anything, and it'll just get better. Okay. So I guess we're going to start with change your marketing perspective. One of the issues that, at least in Western culture, is that all successful modern companies realize there are marketing companies that sell products to fund their marketing. A classic example would be Nike. I think if you buy a pair of Nike running shoes, the shoes actually cost $12 to make. So the question was, why are you paying $150? Well, probably 50 of that's on marketing. And they understand that that's what it takes. If you look at most successful companies today that are in this culture, they understand their marketing companies and fund their marketing with a product or service. If you can take that perspective as a contractor, it will change your business. Because most contractors look at marketing as a bad inconvenience, and they believe in the myth that, build it and they will come. And they look at marketing as something you have to do if you're not really good. So, in the post-pandemic economy, you cannot. Let me go back here. Hold on, Ed. You go back one slide.
Sure.
So in the post-pandemic economy, you cannot just rely on quality workmanship and word of mouth to attract your customers. They said building will come doesn't work. You have to make an effort. So I would say a number, you should spend at least 2 to 3% of your gross on marketing, and that includes your time and money. So you know, if you can look at yourself as a marketing company that does construction, you'll be way ahead of your friends, okay? So there's a couple ways to look at this, right, Ed? There's retailer and there's wholesale. Now, retail goes direct to the homeowners, remodelers, build design companies. You're going straight to the end user. Wholesale, you go to architects and designers and like custom home builders. And that's who uses this system. So let's talk about the advantages of retail and wholesale, okay? Now, the upside of retail is the margins are better. We've had some discussions with Remodelers Advantage people. So shouldn't I make 35 to 40%? Hey, you can do that if you're retail and you're going straight to the consumer. Less transparent. You can do a fixed bid. They're not going to question it. You have less detailed bids. You don't have to use CSI codes. The whole bidding process is easier. And if you get control of the client, you're great. There's more control in the client, and the smaller jobs can be done more quickly. So there's a real lot of upside to retail marketing, but there's also a downside. And the downside to retail marketing is the clients are more focused on and cost conscious. And I use the saying, you know, if you want to marry a rich woman, you have to date rich women. And that has to do with who's actually buying the smaller jobs. You have more clients to deal with. Every client comes with what I call their client, stuff, garbage, whatever it is. And the more clients you have, the more client stuff you have to deal with. The cost of marketing is higher. There's no list. You can't count on a list. You have to actually go. There's no list of how many people in Seattle are going to do remodeling in the next month. There's no list, which makes it harder. There's no proven marketing technique that works. I mean, we've tried everything over the years. There's, referrals, websites, SEO. There's all kinds of ways to do it, but there's no proven method. Believe me, we just heard from somebody today. They said, what if you drip marketing? There's no proven way. That's a downside. There's no residual effect. Every time you get a client, you got to start over. Whereas with wholesale marketing, an architect can send you work over a long period of time. There's no residual effect. You have to start over. It's hard to complete with non-traditional business model. And that means that there's always two guys in a truck. And if you're dealing with especially the middle class consumer, there's a guy down the street who doesn't have workman's comp, has a different business model than you, and he can probably do as good a job as you and do it cheaper. So that's tough. It's basically expensive to do retail marketing. That's the problem. And the cost of sale is way higher. Now, moving on to wholesale marketing. The cons of wholesale marketing, or the pros of wholesale marketing are one, it's very inexpensive. In other words, all it takes is your time and hiring us as consultants. That's just a little pitch there, but you can do it on your own if you want to. There is a list, and it's available at no cost, which is huge. It's very predictable. If you spend X amount of hours, you get Y amount of results. And I've done the math, and marketing architects pays $2,000 to $3,000 an hour on the average. If you take, you get so many jobs, the jobs you so much profit. And the way the numbers work is if you call on 3 architects, you'll find one that you like. The one that you like, you'll have to visit 6 times. So, it may take you 50 hours to get one architect, but that'll be worth $1 million a year for 5 years. So do the math. It pays $2,000 to $3,000 an hour. It always works in major markets. Now, if you're in the middle of nowhere, we've had one client once said, well, there's 3 markets and 3 architects in town, and I went to high school with all of them. That market, probably not so well. But if you're in a decent sized market that has enough architects, and you only need 10 or 12 architects that love you to make your business worth 5 to 10 million a year. They're bigger jobs, and there's less cons to deal with. The average job from architects would be 500 to $1.5 million. Whereas when you're doing small jobs, even though the margin isn't there, there's less hassles. And the clients are less cost conscious. If they're going to hire an architect and they're going to spend 5 to 15% to have the thing drawn, they're less cost conscious. Now, I know a lot of really wealthy people that do worry about money, but they've got it. It's interesting that most of our clients that do big projects and they're doing, say, $1 to $5 million projects, it's all cash. So they're dealing with wealthy people, which means if they want it, they can pay for it. And the other firms you're competing against they have a business model where they have staff and offices and all that kind of stuff. So if you're a smaller contractor, excuse me, and you're competing with the larger contracts, actually you're two guys in a truck to them. Because let's say there's a guy, pick in Dallas, that does 30 million a year. Well, you know he's got a huge staff, a lot of overhead, and whatever, and you come in there and compete against him, you're going to be able to do it for less and still make money because he's got way more overhead than you do. There's a lot of pros to the wholesale marketing. Moving on. The cons, okay? I've heard this over and over again. Well, I used to make 40%, now I'm making 15 to 20. That is true, the margins are lower. You're generally in a competitive situation. Now in retail, that happens all the time. If you get a house call and you're competing with 3 other guys in a contractor and 2 guys in a truck, you still have competition. When you're dealing with architects, they're generally, going to have to go with 2 or 3 contractors sometimes. So you will be in a competitive situation. But again, they're going to be people with a lot of overhead. You're competing against established relationship. They've already got a girlfriend and it's not you. So you're going to have to go through the, they're going to have to, as Ed said, they're going to have to learn to know you, like you, and trust you. There's more transparency. You have to disclose pretty much all your profit and overhead. You can't just give them a bottom line number because they've got to compare. You usually have to go to CSI codes because that's the standard format that architects use when they're comparing bids. Website's crucial. They're going to look at your website and make a decision about you. So if you decide to call in architects and all you have is a bunch of remodeling on your website, they're not going to take you seriously. So you got to spend the resources to have a really nice website, and there's no second chance at a first impression. So you've got to do it right. Established reputation is more important. And I ran across a client the other day, and they had that. Well, we're going to put in that we've been in business for 3 years. That doesn't work. You just don't say how long you've been in business because the guys you compete against have been in business 20 years. And they probably have a lot bigger projects than you do, and you might even have to use some canned photos and just say the kind of projects we like now that we build. And you have to deal with architects. And what can I say? Sometimes they over-design and run the budget up, and that's just the way it goes. Okay, moving on. Ed, there we go. In summary, larger, more established construction companies use a wholesale model marketing. I do not have a client doing over 10 million that isn't getting most of the work from architects. Generally, the projects are of higher quality and the cost per foot is higher. I just talked to a friend of mine in Seattle. His average building cost in Seattle right now for his project is $850 a foot. And that's in Seattle. I was shocked. This approach is only consistently reliable marketing approach we've seen. And believe me, over the 35 years I've done this, I've tried everything. And the only thing I've been able to count on for sure, just like if you eat less and exercise, you get healthier, is this approach. Now, what are the requirements for wholesale marketing? First, you have to have a really good website because there's no second chance of a first impression. The architects are going to look at your site and they're going to make a decision, either take you seriously or not, and that's going to be about 10 seconds. You have to impress projects. If you don't, you're going to have to, put some on there that are canned projects, just say you'd like to do this kind of work. You must be willing with architects' bad habits, and that is over design, don't stick to the budget, throwing contractors under the bus, lower the price, and someone to high loyalty, give your job to other contractors. So, you got to be willing to deal with all this stuff. You must be patient. It takes 9 to 12 months to build results with an architect. Usually, you'll call on 3 a week. You'll find one that you have, actually like. You'll have to meet with them for 7 times, and it takes a long time. You must be willing to dedicate time. And this is the biggest problem. If the first cigarette you smoked killed you, smoking wouldn't be a problem. If you went to the gym and lost 10 pounds the first time, that wouldn't be a problem. But contractors aren't used to dealing with delayed gratification, and it takes time. So you're going to meet with an architect 3 or 4 times, and nothing's going to happen. So unless you're willing to deal with delayed gratification, this is not a good paradigm for you to use. It takes a lot of time and effort before it's rewarded. And again, it's a year. I've been working with some contractors for like 10, 12 years, and now they're at 15 million, 20 million, and they're consistent architects, but it took a long time to get there. You have to kiss a lot of frogs before you find your prince. It's unfortunate but true. Figure if you're lucky, a third of the architects you talk to will actually, you'll feel the chemistry with and be able to work with. Next slide. So you must create a sophisticated bid package. You got to use CSI codes. It's really good if you have your CSI codes tied into your co-constructor, builder, trend, whatever you're using. It's better if you have a cloud-based project management, construction management system. You've got detailed budgets. You just got to be into your game because you're competing with some guys that are really good. If you go an architect and say, I do on time and on budget, I'm a great contractor, they say, well, so is everybody I work with. You have to be willing to sell as the owner. Marketing must be done by a principal of the company. I've almost never, and there's an almost in there, been able to see marketing work with other than the principal. It can work, but that's a real exception. And usually can't hire a salesperson to do this because architects feel offended if you send somebody other than the principal, and they're used to dealing with the principal of the companies they're working with. So if you're willing to meet these requirements, here's the process. Get a qualified list of architects to call on. Local AI directory or house website. And you want to talk about how to do that? So Ed, you want to talk about this part? You know how to do this. You're probably tired of listening to my voice.
Yeah. So the AIA directory, that's self-explanatory, right? But we find that the house website is actually a much more effective way to look for it. Paul likes to call it, it's kind of like match.com for builders and architects. So what you do is you go onto house and you go up to where it says find professionals and you select that, and then you select architects and building designers. And then you type in your zip code. And in this case, we decided to use New Orleans. We have a client that we were just stepping this through with them. And so we're using New Orleans. So within a 50-mile radius of New Orleans, there's 603 architects and building designers. So that's plenty of people that we can find to go onto our list. So the first thing that we want to do is take a look at who's on the list. So here are, what you'll see is a list of each of the architects. And it'll give you a little thumbnail of one of their projects. It gives you a review. It shows you how to send a message, which you don't want to do. But you want to use this information initially to be able to find your list of architects. Now, once you find your list of architects, you're going to want to qualify them into an A list and a B list. And it's really important that you know how to distinguish between the two. So the A list is your starchitects, as we like to call them, right? These are the big, high-profile firms. These are the large firms that are, 20% of these firms are doing 80% of the projects probably in your local market. These architecture firms have 3 or more employees. Their average project size is $1 million to $3 million, and they have a very sophisticated website. So let me give you an example of an A-list architect here in New Orleans. So this is on-site design. Now you can tell just by even looking at their house page that these guys are high caliber. You notice that they've not only got house awards, they've got affiliations. They have 21 projects that they've posted onto their house page, so you can tell that they've been in business for quite a while. The 5 stars, look, everyone's got 5 stars on house, but they also have 7 reviews. So that's actually a little bit light on reviews. Typically, an A-list architect would have more like 15 or 20 reviews. So the next thing that you do is you click here on their website, and that will take you to their website. So an A-list architect has a website that looks like this. I've taken a screenshot of it, but this is actually a video. So that's the new latest and greatest thing in websites, is to have a video on your homepage. So you can tell right away that this guy is building very, very nice projects. And then when you go to the projects, again, clearly this guy is an A-list. You can tell that he's building some very, very nice estate homes. Kind of looks like Gone with the Wind homes, right? Okay, so that's an A-list architect. Let's look now at a B-list architect. So B-list architects don't build estate homes. They typically only have 1 or 2 employees. Their average project size is much smaller. It's more like $500,000, maybe up to $1 million. And their websites are not as sophisticated. So let's see what a B-list architect looks like on a house page. Here is a B-list architect. Now, nothing against Michael Rochelle. I'm sure he's a good architect, but I just want to show why he's a B-list. First off, look at
one of the keys here is that there's a picture of the guy or woman, and it's one person and one picture. That's a B-list architect.
Exactly right. Yep. So there's Michael. We've got a picture of him, and that's his firm. So, you know, he's got no affiliations. He's got one house badge. He only has 3 reviews, and he's got 12 projects. So again, nothing wrong with this, but just to understand that this is your B-list guy. When you go to Michael's website, you know, here's a picture of some shelving unit that he did. This is literally the first thing you see, and it says right there that he does room additions. So again, smaller projects. This guy's clearly a B-list architect. And then when you go to his projects and you look at his projects, you can see that many of them are room additions, smaller projects, remodels, and they are not of the same caliber as an A-list architect. Okay, so once you've determined the A-list and the B-list, what do you do?
When you look at when you go to the website, you go to the About page, and that will tell you about the firm. If there's like 10 people on the firm, it's a big thing. Usually the About page for a B-list architect usually has 1, maybe 2 people on it. A-list architect has a principal, maybe 2 or 3 principals. And it's just a general quality of the About page will tell you how sophisticated these people are. And again, keep in mind that when people are looking at your website, they're making the same judgments about you as you're making about the architect right now.
Right. Great point. All right, Paul, you want to explain why we say start with the B-list architect?
You're doing a great job, Ed. Keep going.
Okay. So the reason that we say, so once you've determined whether they're an A-list or a B-list, so you've created your list on house, you get all of your architects all on one page, then you do your research like I just said by going onto their website and their house page, and you've got your A-list and your B-list. Now, most of you may think you start with your A-list. No, you start with your B-list. Why do you do that? Well, again, going back to the dating model that Paul likes to use, which I think is so perfect, you know, you don't start by dating supermodels, right? You start by dating the girl next door, kind of working on your chops, getting your process together, practicing your pitch. And the thing is that when you start with B-list architects, if you mess it up, it's not such a big deal. So that's why you want to start with the B-list architects. So what you want to do once you have your B-list architects is you pick up the phone and you make your initial call. Now, there's 2 different ways that you can make the call. You can make the call either with or without bait. Now, what do we mean by bait? Bait is that you have a project that you could use an architect on. So you've been approached by a homeowner. It's a somewhat sophisticated project that needs some design input. And so you now use that as bait to be able to attract the architect.
I'll make a comment. If you don't have a big project, sometimes you can just have like a kitchen or bath, and it's maybe a $100,000 deal. And you can start by downplaying the project by saying, gee, Mr. Architect, I know this is only a $100,000 project. It's no big deal for someone like you. Do you have any interest? So you play down that it's only $100,000. Maybe $100,000 is huge for you, but you don't want to tell the architect that. You want to play it down like it's only a $100,000 project. I'm not even sure if you're interested or not. So.
Right. And another good thing to say as well is to mention that you saw them on the house page, and even better, like for this B-level architect here, if we went back to this person, to say, you know, hey, I saw that staircase that you built on 1200 Barone Street, and you know, this project has a staircase as well, and I think you would be a good architect for that. So you're already appealing to them, and they know that you've done your homework. They know that you have gone onto their site, that you've studied their projects, and you're much more likely to engage them as a result of that.
And the way this needs to feel, they need to feel like you've gone through, you've done hours of due diligence, and after these hours of due diligence, you've chosen Mr. ABC architect. They don't want to feel like, right, 10 girls and you're speed dating and you're the 5th one on my list. It's got to be,
right,
this person is special. And you make them
right,
feel like you're the only one they're calling. That's really important. You can't say, I'm calling several architects and I found your name. That does not work. I've been researched for, a week now, and I've decided that you are the best architect for this kind of project.
right. And another thing as well is that it's really important that you approach this realizing that you are a buyer. You're not a seller. Okay. I mean, ultimately you're a seller, but you don't want to approach this situation as a seller. You don't want to go and say, hey, I'm a good builder and I want to work with you. No, you don't talk anything about you. It's all about them. At this point, you are buying. You have a client, you have a project, and you're looking for an architect to work with you on that.
You're basically interviewing them as a potential architect. That's the model.
Right. Now, if you don't have bait, you can also do what we call kind of a little bit more of the mysterious approach, where you basically leave them a message and you say, this is Bob. You don't say that you're a contractor. This is Bob. I found you on House. Please give me a call. That simple. Because if they find out,
your voicemail has to be consistent with that too. So if you're using the number, your voicemail needs to say, this is Bob Jones, not this is Bob Jones contractor. Because if they feel you're calling them as a contractor looking for business, you're done.
Right. Right. So that's the key thing. And if you tell them that in the message, they're going to go, oh, yeah, this is some desperate contractor who's looking for business. He found me on House, and that's it. Where if you just leave your name and you say you found them on House, they'll call you back because they'll think you're a potential client. Now, obviously, once they call you back, don't be dishonest. You explain who you are, but at that point, you get them to call you back. See, the problem is if you leave a message and you say that you're, Bob Jones Contracting, they probably won't even call you back. So, all right. So, again, there's really no standardized pitch. It's customized. It's based on the size of your company, the local market conditions, what type of bait you have, if you even have bait, what your company history is, what your track record is. So you have to customize your approach. And that's what we do with all of our clients, is to work with our clients, kind of understand all of these points, and then craft this approach for them to be able to make that initial contact. So, Paul, what's the one purpose of that initial phone call?
Is just to get a Zoom meeting. Now, in the old days, you had to meet in person. COVID has made this a lot easier because now you can do it via Zoom. So, hallelujah, there's some upsides to COVID. One is construction business is going crazy. Two is you don't have to sit in traffic for hours. I mean, I talked to a guy today, Jim, and he used to have to drive into San Francisco from Fairfield. It was half a day to see an architect. And if they're not there or something happens, the whole thing's blown. Whereas this way, you can do it in 45-minute phone call. Worst case, they don't show up, you just reschedule the call. Way easier than it used to be. Way less resources. This is the upside of COVID.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's talk about this first meeting, right? So as we said, you're buying, not selling. So when you have this first meeting, which again is going to be a Zoom call, you want to focus on them. And we're going to talk about the questions that you're going to ask, but I want to kind of go over the process. The key thing that you're trying to determine is, are these guys out or in? And as Paul says, it's a binary process. They are either out or in. That's it. There's no maybes. It's like my dad says, you can't be a little pregnant, right? You're either pregnant or you're not. So with these guys, they either are in and you want to build a relationship with them, or they're out. So if they're in, the key point after this Zoom call is that you want to schedule the next appointment. And you have to make that second appointment during the first appointment. And we see this happen all the time, right, Paul? We have people and say, well, I had the first. We actually were talking to Alan earlier this week, right? And Alan says, well, I had a really great Zoom call with them, but I didn't schedule another appointment. But I'll call him next week and follow up with them. It's again going back to Paul.
This is the dating analogy. I mean, let's say you found, you met a nice girl at a dance or something, and she gave you your phone number, and you called her up, and you had a really nice conversation on the call, and then she says, great, I'll give you a call, let's get together, let's talk in a week, and we'll get together, I'll give you a call. And you leave it at that. Now she doesn't call you. Well, do you call her back? Let's say you call her back and leave a message. She doesn't call you back. You send her a text. She doesn't call you back. You send her an email. She doesn't call you back. You go, oh my God. So you don't know what to do, right? I mean, this creates hours of frustration and anxiety that are not fun, having to do with how to get this relationship going. So now when you finally get a hold of her, one of two things could happen. It could be, you're on your third phone call. Wow, I'm really glad you called. I have been so busy. Thank you for persisting. It's awesome. We need to get together. I have a project. Wow, I really appreciate your persistence. Or it could be, why are you calling me? This is a waste of my time. I told you I would call you back. Please don't call me again. You don't know which answer you're going to get. And that's scary.
Right. All right. So what do we talk about? What questions do we want to ask during that first meeting? Again, remember that this is all about the architect. And if any of you have dealt with architects, you know that architects oftentimes, they're very passionate about what they do, and they love to talk about their craft. So the first question you ask them is, why did you become an architect? That might go on for 10 minutes. Let them talk. You know what? The longer they talk, the smarter you sound and the more they like you. So that's key here in this first meeting. So the next question you ask, does budget drive design or does dream drive design? So what do we mean by that? Well, unfortunately, with many architects, it's dream drives design, right? They have this great vision and they draw something without any sense of what the client's budget is. So as a builder, you want to work with architects that are budget conscious and can design to a budget. That's ideally what you want to be able to do. So that's why you ask that question. How do you structure your fees? Do you use an hourly basis? Do you do it based on each stage of the project? You want to get some sense of how they structure their fees. Ask them what their courtesy free consultation is. Will they do a free courtesy consultation? Is it just a half an hour meeting with the client? Will they do some initial sketch for free? What will they do? And then further on, ask, well, will you do a schematic set of drawings for, we'd say $1,500, but whatever is kind of reasonable within the market where you are. Okay, this is a key question. Can I subcontract the drawings to you? What you want to do as a builder is you want to stay in control of this process. What you don't want to do is refer a project or a client to the architect and then have the architect take it over and then ultimately have the architect go out and get bids from 2 other builders. That doesn't do you any good. This is also
subject to state law. In some states you can, in some states you can't do this. So it depends on the state.
Right. We were talking with a client this morning in New York, and they were pointing out the fact that the client has to contract directly with the architect. But if you're in a state where they don't have to, it's always better for you to subcontract to the architect rather than the client contracting directly. So this is a really key question, which is, what do you do when the client comes to you and wants to get other bids? And there's only one good answer. What's that answer, Paul?
If you don't build it, I won't design it.
Right, exactly. So what you don't want to do is some architects, I don't know if they learned this in architect school or they feel like it's this fiduciary responsibility. They have to get bids from three contractors. And I was actually, as an owner's rep, talking this morning with a prospective client, and I was telling them, so well, we were going to get the plans and do 3 bids. I said, you know what? That system is broken. It does not work. And I can tell you why later. But again, some architects still believe in the 3 bids, and you don't want to do that. So you want to make sure that they understand if you bring that job to the architect, they're going to make sure that you are the builder for that job. So another question to ask is, what is the contractor's involvement in the design process, right? You want to make sure what you really want to do is what I call collaborative construction, where the contractor is collaborating throughout the design process. You want to make sure that that architect sees that and welcomes that. And again, our San Francisco clients, when they reached out to some architects, the architect actually wrote in their email back, wow, we really would like to meet you because we like to work collaboratively with our builders as we're designing the project. That's the kind of architects that you're looking for. Then ask them, what contractors do you work with and what do you like or dislike about the contractors? So that will give you a good idea whether you're a fit or not. And then the last one is, how do they feel about reciprocity? You know, look, if I bring you a client, you know, will you, you know, reciprocate? And when you have a client that needs a builder, you'll introduce them to me. And again, this is all just a courtesy reciprocity here. We're not talking about, you know, kickbacks or paying people referral fees or things like that. So, all right. So after that first meeting, you want to ask yourself 3 key questions. Can you trust them or not? Do you feel like there's a level of trust with this architect? Do you feel like that if you were to bring him a client, that he's not going to take that client and bid him out to your competitors? Second, how will they treat your client? Is there an alignment between their style and their values and yours? As a builder, you have to find architects that are going to be consistent with your style. And so that's really, really important. And that's what you need to know. And then the last question, which is the most important, is will they respect me? Will they involve me? And will they value me as an integral part of that design process? Or are they going to just over-design for the budget, and then when I bring back the cost, they're going to try and throw me under the bus and say, oh, well, that guy's just way too expensive. Let me find another builder for you, and he'll be able to build my design for the budget that you have. So, all right, so some key things to remember. It takes time to build trust and create this relationship. This does not happen after 1 meeting, 2 meetings, even 3 meetings. This is something that comes through as a process. As Paul said, you have to go through 3 stages. You first have to know them, then they have to like you, and the third is that they have to trust you. And it happens in that order. And a key mistake that many of our clients make initially is that they think they only have to do 1 or 2 meetings. Oh, well, they know who I am, so I'm sure they'll call me when they have a job. No, they won't. Oh, well, they know me. You know, they like me. I've talked to them a couple of times. I'm sure they'll call me. No, they won't. It's not knowing and liking isn't enough. They have to know and like and ultimately trust you. And that takes time and multiple meetings in order to develop that.
Sort of, you know, the analogy,
okay, so,
you know, you wouldn't marry a girl on the first date, and if she would, you wouldn't want to marry her anyway, right? So it takes time.
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. So, and again, the key thing here is several meetings. Paul, what would you say? How many meetings do you think it takes to win over an architect?
I would it takes about 7 meetings generally in about 6 months. Yeah.
Right.
Generally, before you actually get a project, 6 months to a year, and that's you know, over time. So don't even think about giving up until you've had 6 meetings and 6 months involved before you think if it's working or not. And this is a long list of stuff which we can, you know, you can watch the video later to go over these, but there's a lot of ideas for follow-up meetings, and this is just some of them. It depends a lot on who you are, what you have to offer, and it's totally dependent on your resources and that kind of thing. So that's why we work with people on developing up the follow-up meetings, because there is no plan for follow-up meetings. It absolutely depends on you and who you are and your resources. So
exactly.
Going to the next slide.
Yeah. Okay. So the good news and the bad news, right? So the key is you've got to keep repeating the process, right? You rinse and repeat, keep doing it over and over again, and you have to be patient, right? So not only, like Paul said, I think you said 9 meetings here, I put 6 meetings, but that's just to get an offer to bid a job. And then once that architect feels like he can trust you enough to actually give you a chance to bid a job, it's probably going to be 2 or 3 jobs before you're going to win one. And the first job that he's going to give you is not going to be that wonderful $2.5 million custom home. It's going to be some little room addition that he's doing as a favor for a past client, and he doesn't really want to involve his number one A player or builder that he knows because, you know, he doesn't want to use them. So you've got to bid some of these smaller jobs, some of these lesser projects before that architect is going to give you the shot at those really big, juicy jobs. So, all right, so let's talk a little bit more to find a way to get you motivated of why this makes sense and why it's worth your time. So again, the bad news is that the average time to win a job from an architect is 50 hours. We're going to throw that out. Let's say it's 50 hours. The good news is that an average architect is worth about $1 million a year. And usually most architects, if you nurture and continue that relationship, will last for about 10 years. So let's do some math here, all right? How much is your time worth? Okay, so if the average time to win a job from an architect is 50 hours, and the average architect is worth, say, $1 million a year, with an average duration of 10 years, then that's $10 million. So let's say that you have a net margin of 10%. Then that means that that one architect is worth $1 million of net profit. So let's take the best case, which is $1 million for an architect. It's taken you 50 hours over however many months to develop that. That's $20,000 an hour. That's what your time's worth that you've spent on the architect. Now let's take the downside. Let's say that architect only brings you, $2.5 million at a 10% net. That's $250,000. Well, even if all you net is $250,000, your 50 hours of time is $5,000 per hour. So if someone was going to pay you $5,000 an hour for every hour that you spent marketing to architects, would you do it? I would think you probably would, right? But again, the problem is, as Paul said, it's delayed gratification. People just don't want to spend the time because they don't see the return. And that's why you have to look at it this way. As Paul said, this is a proven approach. We have seen it work with all of our clients, and you just have to realize that that's what you have to do. So there's the challenge. How do you change your behavior, right? So the only way that this process fails is from a lack of persistence, right? Paul has done this for so many years that we know that it works in lots of different markets with lots of different contractors and lots of different architects. But again, there's no immediate gratification. Like Paul said, if the first cigarette killed you, if the first donut you ate made you gain 10 pounds, you wouldn't need it, right? If the first phone call that you made got you a $2 million project with an architect, you'd do more of them. But anyway, that's it. And as Paul says, right, it's like we're personal trainers. Everyone that follows the diet and exercise program, they always get healthier, but the challenge is getting people to do it. So that's it. Paul, do you want to add anything to it?
Well, it's having done this for many years, it is the problem. And what's crazy is I've had clients over the years that have done this, and it works incredibly well, and they get a whole bunch of work, and I say, well, why did you stop? And they say, because it works so well. I don't get the logic. Because what happens is you'll get busy, and unless you build your bench, your resources of employees and subcontractors to match it, if you do this, I've got, a guy in Seattle, and he's at, I don't know, like 6 million, it'll be at 10 million next year. He's booked through the middle of next year. And we just got to hire enough people because it's working for him, and it's all from architects. And he came up with this saying, which I like, which is, COVID has caused people to start feathering their nest or build a new one. So COVID is one of the best things that happened to the construction industry as far as sales go. So we need to take advantage of it and do it now. So in my personal experience is that anybody doing more than $500,000 a year in net profit is using the architect. I'm sure a lot of people do it well in the retail market. I just don't know any. So my own experience is everybody I know making $500,000 to $1 million a year is using this model.
All right. Well, that's it. If you have questions, I can see that David has done a great job of answering some of the questions that came through from Jim and Aaron. And if any of you have any other questions, please feel free to call us or email us. These are all of our personal phone numbers, our mobile phone numbers, and our emails. we get back to every question, every response. Any of you that have any questions, please feel free to just pick up the phone and call us or drop us a line, and we'll get right back to you.
Keep in mind what we're willing to do. If you're not a client, we'll still spend an hour with you showing you how to make this work for your company and your market, because there isn't any standard formula. So as a way of getting to know you better, we'll be happy to spend an hour with anybody that listens to this saying, okay, how do I use this in Dallas or Tennessee or wherever? I've been in business for 2 years or 20 years. I've done big, it's all different. So we'll be happy to spend an hour with you that customize this system so you can use it, and then you can use us to help you or just do it on your own. It's fine with us either way.
All right. So, all right, just to remind you that we are doing these free webinars every other Friday. And so we will be back again 2 Fridays from now. And David was a little quiet on this webinar, but he's actually going to be leading our next webinar, and he's going to be talking about, David, you want to give a little preview of your subject for the next webinar?
Yeah, so really simply, it's the economy changes, as we've all been through. Gosh, 2008, a pandemic, downturns before that. And so you'll see successful businesses have more than one profit center. And so we've just been talking about one of them today, working with architects. You probably, most of you generate referral business, a very strong referral business. So I'm going to be talking about taking your past clients. And basically, if you're listening to this, if someone's staying in their home and they've done a major addition, if they're not moving, when they finish whatever work that they've done, in most cases, they're already thinking about the next project. So when we speak next, I want to focus on how you begin creating that relationships which directs all those future projects to your company. And simply the tagline is, when any project ends, our relationship is just beginning. I want to build on that when we talk next.
Great. So that'll be on August 21st. So we hope you all have a good couple of weeks, and we look forward to seeing you again on August 21st. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye. Have a good evening.
Enjoy your weekend.